So you're listening to Salford City Radio 94.4 FM with your host Jimmy Petruzzi on the Friday Sports Show. And we're very fortunate on this show to bring you interviews with the world-class athletes, some of the best sports people around the world, and coaches and people relate to sports who work in sports, in media, in coaching, as participants. We speak to footballers, we speak to many different people across different walks of life. And in the public eye, boxing's been really popular. It's made a bit of a renaissance recently, albeit behind the scenes there are people who are working hard and have been working hard for many, many years. Boxing is a huge sport. It's got a strong tradition in this country, certainly, and we've had many great fighters in the UK over a number of years. And today we bring you someone who has participated as a boxer at amateur level, at professional level. He's been a boxing coach and really done exceptionally well, and is really well placed to talk about boxing, his thoughts on boxing as a participant, his thoughts as a coach, and also the direction boxing's going in this country at the moment and beyond. So there's probably not going to be too many better people placed to talk about it, because he's been involved in the sport for roughly 4 decades as a fighter, as a coach, and obviously as a fan as well. So it's a great opportunity. And the goal of the show is really to increase awareness and participation in sports. That's what we want to do. We bring you all the local news, but also news from around the world and around the country. So Alan Levene, thank you for coming on board the show. Great to have you on board.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me as a guest. I feel very privileged.
No, it's fantastic to have you as a guest, Alan. And we spoke off air, and having known you for a while now, it's great to have you on board the show. And yourself, let's sort of start with our listeners your journey. I mean, you start boxing, is it in 1979 as 11 years of age?
Yeah, such a long time to go now. Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah, I started off obviously being from Liverpool. I was Liverpool 8 Toxteth kid originally, and then we moved down from Toxteth into Dingle, which is both parts of Liverpool 8. But yeah, I started my career off fighting for a little amateur club which was just down towards the Dock Road area of Liverpool, which was in a big tenement block called Carl Gardens. The club was actually called the Southern ABC, and I started my career off, me and my brother, because both of us boxed. And I started off, my first fight was 29th of March 1979, yeah, in a little Labour club just on Warwick Street there, yeah, and here I am today, 52 years of age, and I'm very blessed and lucky. The fight game's been very good to me, even though I didn't get what I would have liked to have done in a professional game. As a coach, I'm still travelling the world with boxing, so very, very lucky.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and we'll definitely talk about that, and I'm sure we could do a show that goes on for hours, and in the time we've got, we'll sort of cover as much as we can do, and no doubt we'll have you back on. And I mean, there's people listening, I suppose, parents listening, and yourself, you start boxing at 11 years of age, and for me, I think it's important to get involved in sport, whether it be martial arts or boxing. I think it's really good for self-esteem and confidence, absolutely. And in terms of parents thinking, okay, boxing, and obviously, you know, some people will think, well, what are the benefits for someone at that age? And no doubt things have changed over the years in terms of, you know, safety. But what's your take on sort of boxing and starting at a young age, Alan?
Yeah, I think listen, I was lucky. I've no regrets whatsoever about my parents letting me go, and you know, because I was in there. I mean, especially nowadays, the sport is governed much better nowadays. Yeah. You know what I mean? As coaches, you have to go before boards and get accredited, which is only right. You know, it's not as loose as it was back in the days when I was coaching. So you go into clubs now where people are all CRB'd, yeah. You know, which is, you know, if you're putting your kids, you want to put them into the right, you know, put them in the right hands of people where they're going to be looked after, you know. And I mean, even in this local community here, Salford, you know, Salford's very, very similar to where I come from in Liverpool, Toxteth, Dingle, and you know, they have a very, very, very proud about themselves, you know. I mean, if you ask anyone where they're from, you know, anyone from Salford, they'll tell you straight away, I'm from Salford. Absolutely. They won't tell you that, they won't say they're from Manchester, you know. That's their own personal identity, and rightly so, you know. I'm proud of my roots, Liverpool 8 kid, as I say. I was Toxteth and Dingle, and that's where even though the family are now based out towards the airport in Garston. But as far as parents putting the kids into sport, you know, I sadly, in my day, I went on and won national titles, and you know, it's not about me. We're talking about encouraging kids and children into sports, and there's not enough of that. But when I was there at my age, there was a lot more youth clubs. There's the youth club system seems to have broken down for some reason, and that's very, very sad for people like me, you know, because I won National Association of Boys Clubs title. They were a big. You know, they were a big part of the boxing calendar at my age as a young boy, you know. And so I think the youth clubs is gone, you know, has slightly lost a lot of it. You know, too many kids are sitting at home on computers when, you know, and PlayStation games when they should be better out making friends and making... you know, making good companions even for life, you know. But as you know, there is so much out there. I just think they have to do research, and it's like anything. If you're a child and you've got a child, you know, you want to get them out or hear out and put them into sport, you know, get on the internet and have a look and see what's there. And I think you as a parent, you have a duty. And this is only my opinion. You have a duty to find something that lights your child's fuse, as in a sport or something that they like. If you don't and you choose to switch off to it, and you know, this isn't a personal pop at the parents, but you know, try and find something for your kids to go into, because I've got friends of mine, Jim, who you know, my big loves were always football. I'm a Liverpool fan for me sins. But, you know, I'm a big football fan. I've still got friendships with friends who I played football with at school. You know, they're still on my social media. They're still on, and football was always me first love, which was actually stopped by a school teacher, but we'll maybe digress on that a bit later. But as a parent, I think you should, take your kids to sports and ask them afterwards, and take them to a class or something, you know, and take them and see if they like it, you know, tennis, football, boxing, whatever. I mean, personally, and this is only my personal opinion, if anyone was to take, and they don't like the impact side of boxing, which is understandable to an extent, you don't want to take your child to go and watch them get punched in the head. It doesn't quite fit, you know, and I understand that side of it. But here's one for you. A few years back, I ended up coaching some lads who were MMA fighters, professional MMA fighters, and I worked with them. And in that period of time, I'm always open to different styles of coaching and finding out stuff, because you can digress and pick bits out of other people's game and add them to yours. That's the way I believe as a coach.
Absolutely.
You know, you should never close yourself off to you know, I think that's people's insecurities that do that. But going aside, the point I'm making is that I come across some absolutely fantastic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coaches. Now, so if I had the child, and if I was growing up in today's day and age, and I didn't want my kids, boy or girl, to be hit in the face, which I can understand, you know, I'd probably be taking them to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class and finding something like that, you know. And the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu rule is obviously to stop people doing what they're doing and then impose yourself on them. You know, that is chess and good thought with muscles. You know, and I know there's multi fabulous black belts around Manchester, city of Manchester, you know, as there is in my own city in Liverpool. But at that time in particular, I actually met a big character in the game, which was Rico Rodriguez, the ex-UFC heavyweight champion of the world at the time. He come out of the UFC, but Rico was coaching and doing some seminars in the UK, but he was working out of the Wolf's Lair, which was just just on the outskirts of Liverpool. And he was fighting here at the MEN in Manchester, and I was working with a fighter at the time called Leroy Barnes, who was on the show at the MEN with Rico. And what I'd done, it just felt, obviously I'd met Rico a couple of times when he'd been doing seminars, and I'd watched him coach, and he was absolutely sublime. Just the way he coached and the way he put it over, and he made it look so easy. It was, you know, to see anyone in any field of sport perform or coach, you know, there's certain ways, and he'd done it so gracefully, and he'd worked at the highest level. And the way he coached, and he was coaching with lads who hadn't been on the mats for that long, but he still made it so easy and so basic and I watched him talk about big victories he'd had, about what he'd done in the fight where he had with Andrei Orlovsky and the big fights, you know, that he'd had there, and how we'd manoeuvred people to obviously to get the win, and just it was just sublime to watch him do that. So the question you'd ask me over kids and what I do as a parent, you know, find out what sports, you know, that your kid might like. Take them to the nearest venue that teaches that. Take them in there and ask your child afterwards, did you enjoy it? Because you know, sports is all about enjoyment. You have to like and enjoy what you do. And touching on that point a little bit further, I know I'm going on a little bit, but touching a bit on that, I have also seen the bad side of that, whereas parents have forced their children into sport and across the board, and you know that's not a good thing anyway. Relationships break down, never get repaired in life, and I've seen that where people have been to and this is a coach's nightmare. I've had it myself, overzealous parents, you know. I'll tell you a quick story on that. Funny enough, I was coaching for a short while with football up in the Lake District, and we were teaching the kids, and the kids were only playing in the small half pitches, you know, about 5-7 aside teams or whatever. And the parents come one night and asked me why their child wasn't picked to play football. And I said, well, maybe if you stayed a little bit longer and you watched a training, you know, a training session, and watched and see where it was, you know, and basically, without putting it, you know, bluntly, you know, her child just wasn't good enough to make the team. Absolutely, you know, but you know, she thought it was great to pull up in the car, put the handbrake on, leave the engine running, come and pay me as subs for turning up to training, and then get back in the car and proceed to go home and carry on with their life or whatever, but then come back and question, you know, why her son wasn't playing. But that's overzealous parents. But as a parent, the question you'd ask me, Jim, take them to whatever sport they love. If it isn't for them, find another one, and keep opening doors for your kids, you know, because that's what it's all about.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really great point. And I think it's with the experience that you've got, Alan, and you've been a coach, and you've had, you know, obviously as a fighter, well respected, and we'll talk about your career as well, which is fascinating, and I think that's really important. And you know, as a parent myself too, and I suppose it's like the happy medium where, I'm all for enjoyment. I think it's really important, but also to make them aware of the benefits too, because in life you're not always going to have sessions that are great. And I think for me, certainly coaching sort of made the transition from the enjoyment's great, but sort of coaches started making their sessions all around the principle of like making it entertaining almost. And I think it's a happy medium where you've got to get the work done. And I did some boxing training. I stood in the off season, and this was sort of in between football and track and field. And for me, it was tough. It wasn't like it is now. It wasn't as controlled as now. But it is what it is. And I grew up in a very working class area, and had to be quite streetwise too. And so the thing is that, you know, we used to sort of spar, and you know, there were times that we'd test ourselves, and that it was what it was, you know. But from the fitness point of view, it was phenomenal. I don't think, and you're a better placed than me to sort of comment on that, but I don't think I've seen, you know, physically fitter athletes than boxers. It was like in terms of just, you know, the body composition, the body fat, the heart rate, just we're talking like millimeters. It is. It's funny because you see like world class fighters when they're coming just ready. I'd probably say the week before the fight, Jim, because then we get sort of like they get the making the weight process and they sort of come down. But you know, you see some fighters who are great, who are naturally at the weight, and you see them on the scales, and for me they look like a thoroughbred racehorse. Yes, exactly. But you know, boxing, I know it's my chosen sport and it's what I love and that, but I probably say even fitness wise it's probably the best sport because it covers so many bases, and you know, any combative sports you need to be strong and you need to be physically fit, you know, so it covers a lot of multitudes of certain stuff, you know. And for me, obviously, and that's why so many people do boxercise and boxing one-to-one, you know, classes and whatever, because the physical aspects of it and the fitness aspects are really, really good, you know. Yeah, and I think that's really great as well, you know, the improvise and the boxercise, but I still think, in my opinion, and I've got nowhere near your experience, and I don't pretend to have that. I've worked as obviously in sports performance conditioning, and I've been involved in a lot of sports over the years. But one thing's for sure, I think you can't really beat the sort of the gym gym, the old school gym.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You know, sometimes and the fabulous. I mean, some of these gyms, and I mean, you know, I've been members of certain like sort of like gyms, you know, which help, you know. But I am old school. I come from an old gym years ago as a kid, and it's not about what you actually put. It's about what you do while you're in there. You know, and it's nice the nice treadmills with the TVs on and all that, you know. But I'm old school, mate. You know, I don't run with it. You know, I have done over time a little bit with headphones on, but I don't. I'm old school, mate. When I run of a morning, I want to run and I want to be able to hear myself breathe. And as mad as it is, I'll go back to an old. You know, I left school early, so I had to educate myself. And one of the best books I did read, funny enough, was the Charlie Francis book. Now I know you have a background in track and field, but the Charlie Francis, it resonated with me because it was about Ben Johnson's story, Speed Trap, and it was anyone who is a fabulous, you know. And Charlie Francis was that good a coach that he knew when Ben had overcooked himself. When I say overcooked himself, he'd overtrained by the sound of his feet on the track. Now that is a fabulous coach. Anyone who has that good an ear to do that. So he knew when Ben wasn't at his best and when he wasn't, when he was a bit sluggish, you know. But
his intuition.
Yeah, I've known that. Now that's a very good coach. But you know, so it's
and your own career, Alan, as a fighter, it starts in '79, 11 years of age. You get involved in boxing, and what would you say? How did you find your career? I mean, it was 100 amateur fights, and you went professional, and we'll talk about that as well. But how would you find your career itself? I mean, looking back on it.
Yeah, I had a great career, and what I think what you must do, a lot of people look back with regrets, you know, and I think, listen, it's gone. You mustn't hang on to that, you know. You hang on to hot stones. There's only you that gets burned. So I had a fabulous career, and even now still travelling the world. It was fabulous because, no disrespect to my parents, just working class parents like many others around the areas that we come where most fighters come from, you know. They're never the kids who are sort of born with the silver spoon in the mouth, you know. It's, you know, boxing's a street sport. It's people from the streets that they generally come from, who've had a tough upbringing and whatever. But I had a great amateur career and was very fortunate. So I boxed for a few clubs. Started off at the Southern, had a few years down there. Then I moved to I'd say probably a more fashionable club, the Golden Gloves, which was still in the same area of Liverpool 8, Oxford Dingle. And I went there, and I was with the Golden Gloves for a few years, and I won a few national titles there, you know. And there was there was a cluster, and this is what happens in clubs. There was in that club they produced national champions before, and they had national champions and England internationals in that club. So it's funny, and what I say to people as a coach, when you get kids in you get a cluster of a certain a small group of fighters that really want to push, and they sort of keep raising the bar on each other, and they get the best out of each other, you know. Even in sparring they all want to be the best, and so you sort of get them, and so that then brings a great winning formula and a bit of self-pride in the gym, where they keep pushing and making each other better day by day. And that's what happened. And then I followed the format obviously down there that was set out with the coaches, and I was fortunate to box in national finals and then win a couple of NABC titles. I actually got to 3 NABC titles back to back each year. I think it was 84, 85, 83, 84, 84, 85, 85, 86. The first year I lost them up in Newcastle national final, and I thought I was a bit unjust to lose, but I lost, and I worked me socks off for the next 2 years to come back the next 2 years and obviously win the national titles that year. And then I won it. I lost the Class A's up in Newcastle, the Class B's I won in Poole and Dorset, and the Class C I won at the Grosvenor House in London, just by Hyde Park.
Yeah, and so with yourself, you box in an era where, I mean, obviously now we've got some great boxers too, but certainly the era that you boxed in was some phenomenal boxers. You know, the one we all sort of tuned in to watch the likes of Tyson, but also, you know, the middleweight you had, and in the UK you had so many boxers too. And did you have anyone say that you used to sort of think, oh, here we go, him again type thing, or was anyone? Yeah,
I think what you obviously you have your figures that come up through sports and in there. I mean, Barry McQuiggan was a big, you know, even while I was amateur, Barry McQuiggan, because he united both sides without getting dragged into politics, both sides of Ireland, and he was a very, very good fighter. Barry was an exciting fighter, and he obviously Barry went on to be world champion, you know, and a very, very good world champion at that. But yeah, there was always figures there that you know, big figures, and obviously you'd see them. And boxing, I'd say, probably at this moment in time is probably at its highest point I've ever known it, because we have the big TV stations, Sky, and when I was a kid, I mean, sports night, I'd actually listen on the radio on the Tuesday night to Mickey Duff and Terry Lawless's promotion at the Royal Albert Hall, for then to watch it the very next night on sports night, you know. So you'd never get, I mean, sports so accessible now on TV stations and platforms, you know. It's so we obviously, even then, although we didn't have the TV like what you have now, you know, we still sort of held all them big stars. I mean, for me, as one of my idols as a fighter was Marvin Hagler, and I've had the pleasure of meeting Marvin on numerous occasions. One particular time was here in Manchester, you know, and he was here for the time Mike Tyson come over to fight Julius Francis at the MEN. Wow. And but forget the fight, putting the fight aside, you know, Mike ended up doing Francis early. But my most enjoyable part of that night was sitting in the bar in the hotel with Marvin Hagler, you know, because Marvin was one of my idols. Tremendous. Wow, he could fight, you know. So even then, in them days, our fighters then, you know, they're not as accessible now. Most fighters now come over on tours and do tours even after the career's finished. And you know, but you know, Marvin Hagler for me was a true fighting man. You know, he stayed in the one weight category all his career, and for me, so Marvin was and still is one of my big idols. You know.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting stuff. I mean, one of my sort of one of the people I sort of really enjoyed watching fights. Alan was Joe Colzaghi.
Joe was
a later on.
Joe was a fabulous fighter, and you know, very, very. I don't know whether really Joe got the applaudance he deserved, if that makes any sense, Jim. You know, and it's quite funny, and it is a great thing. Touching on this now, I'll throw this one out there for anyone who's listening. You know that Joe's father Enzo. Funny enough, Enzo didn't actually fight himself.
Wow.
So Enzo was a musician, believe it or not, Jim. You know, and he was a larger than life character. And he had to fight his way growing up himself. You know, because he was Italian.
Absolutely,
that was brought up in Wales. You know, so he had to fight anyway, and he wasn't the biggest man, Enzo. But if he did do, Joe's father Enzo had a host of world champions which he brought out of his gym in Newbridge, and you know, he had some old school stuff, you know, and you go in that gym, and I've been fortunate to go in the gym. It's very, very old school gym, you know. There's no big luxury, you know, but there's no like health and fitness club by no means, you know. It was a proper old school boxing gym. Now, when I was saying before over people, you know, and a cluster of fighters, this is what happened at the time when Enzo was obviously on the programme of getting his boy ready, Joe, and Joe became a great fighter. And then what happened then, like a magnet, they drew other fighters around Wales. You know, Enzo Macronelli come with them.
That's right, yeah.
And then they all of a sudden they had a cluster of about 4 or 5 fighters who went down there, and Enzo ended up having multiple world champions himself under his own tutelage, you know.
I mean, phenomenal, really, like you say, and phenomenal. And in terms of Joe, like some of the fights he had, I mean, Kessler and Junior, and then he goes up a division. And
I mean, the great when I say the great story, it was sad, but it worked out right for Joe in the end. Is whatever, you know, and. You know, Joe was with Frank Warren, and he had the great fight with sort of breakout fight with which was Jeff Lacey. You know, because Joe started his career first of all with Mickey Duff, a boxing manager that I was going to go with initially, and so Joe started there with Mickey Duff, and he had very terrible hand trouble. He had that all the way through his career. Joe did. So he'd have fights, he'd have to pull out of fights, and he couldn't. And Joe would only spar for the last 2 weeks of his camp, which a lot of people would take gasps of breath on that and different bit. But look, it worked for Joe. One thing I've learned, through my own friend who's a sports scientist, and we have that great old cliche, and we use it all the time, not one cap size fits all.
Absolutely.
And that, again, goes across the board with coaching. So Enzo's, his style of coaching suited his boy. I mean, Joe Calzaghe is probably the best British fighter, period. Yeah. His career, whatever your choices are, we all like certain fighters. I like certain fighters, but let's put it up there. Joe Calzaghe went through his career undefeated, unbeaten, and when he did get there, sort of a funny thing happened, and I'll tell you a little bit of, when I say inside stuff that happened in there. He had the fight. I think it was it could have been a Jeff. I might be slightly wrong here on the fight, but he had the breakout fight with Jeff Lacey. So what happened with Joe? Joe was promoted by Frank Warren. So Joe had a fight and never got paid his pay packet, which he shouldn't have. He should have got, and he never got the figure that he did do. So what then coincided was Frank's company, obviously Sports Network. I think they went bankrupt, which then put Joe in a great position then to promote himself.
Okay.
So what happened then? Joe's at the height of his career. Joe then goes and gets a promoter's license, which he could do. And then Joe starts to promote himself, bearing in mind that Joe is now on the highest mountaintop of his career at this stage. And then on the back end of that, Joe then goes and scores the wins and makes the fights with Roy Jones happen and Bernard Hopkins. So not only then is Joe then getting only the fighters' percentage of the purse, Joe then goes into a different stratosphere completely. Yeah. And where he would have been getting his normal pay packet of boxing, Joe then gets the promoter's gate. I know him and Roy Jones went 50-50 down in the promotion. I think it was at Madison Square Garden for that fight, and they both broke it up between themselves right down and self-promoted it themselves. Wow. And pocketed there. Now Joe is mega very wealthy. Yeah. And for the fighters' point of view, sort of by default, Frank going bankrupt, then put Joe in, which at first Joe probably thought, well, he haven't been paid for that fight, but if he did, Joe got paid tenfold for the other fights of his career, so that worked out really, really well for him. And being a fighter, that is the best thing that could have happened. So that's a win-win.
Absolutely. I'm sure the listeners are fascinated and something that will sort of be interesting to sort of touch on in terms of the promotion of fights and we sort of see boxers and at the weigh-ins and the promotion, but in terms of your own career, Alan, we talked about Seoul and the I wouldn't say, I mean, these are my words, I suppose. We maybe a little bit disappointed that the Seoul Olympics didn't.
Yeah, that was the Olympics that I was chasing for, and obviously. At the time, we was obviously at the time that we was down at the National Sports Centre was down at Crystal Palace, and I was shooting for the '88 Seoul Olympics. And funny enough, that was the Olympics. That's why I was saying over the book over Ben Johnson resonated with me, because that was the games that Ben tested positive. For there. But so 88 on the run up to 88, we were down. Obviously, we were in the GB squad. Down at Crystal Palace, and the GB coach at the time, Kevin Hickey, funny enough, and Kevin resides over at Blackpool, where I reside, where I live. And anyway, so on the run up to there in the squad, what they did, they had numerous fighters of certain weights. So at my weight, a featherweight, 57 kgs, was myself was in the running for it, and a good fighter from Scotland called Dave Anderson, and Colin Macmillan. Now Colin went on to be a world champion in the professional side, and a very, very good fighter Colin was. So Kevin Hickey had told us, obviously down at Crystal Palace, that whoever won the 1988 ABA title that year will be the one who gets the vest, who gets the spot to go to Seoul. So earlier on in the competition, I went out in the the English semi-finals to another great friend of mine who become a good pro called John Joe Irwin. I went out to John Joe, and Colin got beat in the ABA final by Dave Anderson. So Dave then took obviously the spot to go to Seoul. Colin then turned pro with Terry Marsh initially, but then ended up going with Frank Warren, and Colin went on to be a world champion, but Dave got the spot to go to, obviously, to Seoul, and then I got the sort of runners-up spot sort of thing in case there was any injuries or whatever, and I got picked to go to, and lucky enough, a captain, the very, very good England team, to go to the Acropolis Cup over in Greece that year. So there's some great fighters in that team as well, and Henry Wharton, who went on to be a very, very good professional fighter. Henry fought twice for the world title against Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn, and as well as being British, obviously Commonwealth and European champion himself.
That's fascinating, Alan, to think. Okay, so you sort of you got your mind set on competing in Seoul, and okay, it might not go the way you want, but in that sense, you sort of still managed to sort of captain the England team, the young team. And
I was fortunate because obviously a few obviously national titles as you go along there, you sort of improve and move on, and you come to the notice of like your area coaches, which was the Northwest coaches, and they then put you forward obviously to go and train with the national team. So then from ages of probably 15 to 17, I was down at Crystal Palace most every other weekend. I was either on a Northwest Counties squad meeting somewhere in Manchester or Liverpool, or I was actually down at Crystal Palace. So we'd go down there regular. So then obviously after winning national titles, you sort of progressed along the line, and then you obviously, if you were lucky enough, which I was, I then broke into the Young England team, and then made my way through the obviously the international setup sort of thing. But I was very, very fortunate. I went to the Italian juniors, and I was fortunate to medal over there and won a gold medal. And then I went to the European juniors over in Copenhagen, 1986. And there was a great. Funny enough, I was doing a little bit of research to bring stuff back to me, to my mind, being at my age yesterday. Funny enough, and I dug up some old results, But in the '86 Europeans, there were some great fighters over there, that were great. But who went on to do it? I mean, if I wouldn't have lost to Santo Serio, the Italian I lost to in the prelims, my next fight was actually against Costa Sue. Now, most Manchester fans will remember Costa coming over here and fighting Ricky Hatton here. I mean, what a fight that was, fighting Ricky at the MEN. And Costa back in the day. We were funny enough. We touched on it briefly before the show, and Costa was the Lomachenko of then. Bearing in mind that the Eastern Bloc then was not as fragmented as it is nowadays. It was the big old Eastern Bloc. And Costa, as I say, was the Lomachenko then of there. He'd had hundreds of fights and only lost very, very few. Then went over. Funny enough, because I know the story. Costa, again resonating, Costa went over to Australia for the World Championships, and the promoter over there, Bill Mordy said to Costa, listen, I want you to stay here and turn professional. So Costa never went back with the Russian boxing team. He actually stayed in Australia. Bill Mordy got him Australian citizenship, and Costa set off on his journey for being world champion in Australia. He had a fabulous, and he's still there now with son, and it's a fabulous story.
Absolutely, and we have a sprinkling of people in Australia listening to the show as well. And I remember sort of growing up in Australia, watching Costa fight, and absolutely tremendous boxer, and also a tremendous ambassador for the sport too. Alan, just his approach, his professionalism, and
he's still a super. Even now, funny enough, I follow Costa still on social media, and some of his stuff is fabulous. He's still great. He's iconic, Costa Sue, because he was the old school Russian athlete.
Yes.
And great, but Costa was great anywhere. I mean, the Australians love him as much as the Russians do. I mean, who could not love him? I mean, even after being out in injury, he come back and he fought Sab Judy. And he absolutely scorched Judy. And it was quite funny. Judy was standing there with Mike Tyson, and Costa didn't. He's not going to go grey with Woody with that. But Costa got out and actually brought him right onto that right hand, and it was anyone gets the chance, you've got to watch that fight on YouTube, but Costa's a great guy, superb.
Absolutely, it's fascinating stuff. And I mean, one of the, I suppose, what can be a contentious issue sometimes in boxing, I find, is turning pro, and do I sort of go for the next Olympics, or go pro, and we see that a lot. And I think it's a difficult one, because obviously I suppose everyone's goal is to, not so everyone's goal, but the vision is to sort of make a living out of fighting. And
yeah, we all have dreams and ambitions, don't we? No matter what sport we're in, And my ambition for me was to turn professional. And it was funny because I used to say to me, Dad, I don't want to go to school today, But look, I'm going to get up early, I'm going to run. And we'd had this constant tug of war with my dad, and what I'd done for some days, I'd get up early, get up at 6 o'clock and go and run, and I just sort of, my dream and my ambition was to turn professional and move to London, because predominantly then, at my time, the boxing was controlled in London. When I say it was controlled in London, it was dominated by the old sorts of like boxing mafia of Mike Barrett and Mickey Duff and the people who had run it for years. And there was very, terrestrial TV then was only like 4 channels, 3 channels at that, BBC One, BBC Two and ITV, that was it, World of Sport on a Saturday, which then would show the fights from the week before of the big fights in America, But, so my ambition was to turn pro, which it did get to do, and even today, I turned pro with Barry Hearn, and Barry Hearn is a lovely, lovely man. Probably too nice to be in boxing, if I'm being truthful. And Barry's never knocked anybody for money. He pays everyone, and he has great sayings. And big people and characters leave parts in your life.
Yes.
No matter what walk of life they are. Yeah. And Barry Hearn left a massive part of him in me. He was one of the best people I've ever met in my life, Tell you the funny thing about the walk down there's how successful things happen. Eddie Hearn, who we'll all know today, obviously is now running, obviously holds the reins of his dad's TV formats and everything else, all set up by Barry, taken on away from Eddie. Eddie's a fabulous promoter, but the seeds were sown by his father with Matchroom. But one of Barry's things, and funny, I was always a cheeky kid, and my philosophy is shy kids get no sweets. Come on, I'm a toxic dingle kid, and listen, we never had nothing as kids, so you had to be forceful and ask for it. But so what I used to do, go to get time with Barry, was you need the letter off our Lord to basically get time with him, because he was just so busy. And we used to have the digs we used to live in was right next door to his office on Western Road in Romford in Essex. So I knew that Barry got in the office early of a morning, and obviously my time was to catch him in there, because at 9 o'clock onwards all day you could never get him. He was either at a press conference, he was on the phone, he was in meetings, and this was a man who was running a big empire, because at the time, don't forget, he was controlling the WPBSA. Well, they said he wasn't controlling it, but he was with us, because he had all the snooker guys, he had everybody there, that was how he come into the sport, was through the snooker. Always a big lover of boxing. So anyway, Barry would get in the office very, very early. So I'd go and I'd knock on the door and I'd go in there, and he was great, Barry, because what you do, you go in, he'd take you off your subject, not be meaning to, and he'd get in, and I'd come out some days, I'd be scratching my head and I'd be thinking, wow, I've forgotten what I went in there to ask him. So what I did do in the end, I got obviously a piece of paper, and I'd write down, like I was putting him through a questionnaire, I'd ask the questions I wanted to ask. So I'd go in, knock on the thing. Now he'd have to come down the stairs and open the door of a morning, but anyway, I said to him, Barry, how come? Now this is how successful people operate, and again, good people leave big things in your life. And this is one thing I always remember him telling me, and I said, Barry, listen, how come you're the boss and I come in and you're in here before anybody else gets in here? And again, something that stays in my mind. And he said to me, he said, Alan, what I do, I come in of a morning. He said, no, I'll come in at 7 o'clock. He said, no, I have 2 hours every day. He said, before the phone start ringing at 9 o'clock. He said, now, them 2 hours every day, he said, when they go along the end of the week, he said, I've stolen 2 days on me competition, 2 working days on me competition. Yeah. And when you're a fighter, they're not things that come in your head, because that's not what your thing. But later on in life, this is how successful build, so that was left in me from then, and rightly so, so them 2 hours of a day when he got in before everybody else, he was 2 hours every day ahead of his competition. So what a winning format that is, so.
Yeah, no, that's really fascinating, in the sense that you mentioned that. I certainly agree in my experience of talking to people who have been successful in their field. They are, and they do sort of look to take every advantage they can get.
That's right, yeah.
In terms of yourself, and for the listeners wondering the difference between being an amateur and pro, Alan, what's the sort of the gap between an amateur and professional? What are some of the differences?
Yeah, I mean, it's as much as it is, what this is again only my perception on boxing, amateur and professional boxing. It's a bit like boxing is athletics, and in athletics you have sprinters and you have marathon runners, and I'll put it in that analogy. Amateur boxing is 9 minutes, 3 threes, good, very, very fast, and they cram that much, into that time. It's about work, get as much good work done as you possibly can. Whereas professional boxing, it goes down the big, especially at world title fights, 12 rounds, and there's so many adaptations that you'd have to make possibly in there. I mean, you could be in a world title fight and you could be in there, your fighter gets put over on the floor, he has to come back, you have to, make him recover from that and find his way back into the fight, and then you're banking on maybe getting to round 6 and 7 and his head clears again, and that sort of thing, and then or maybe a fighter picks up a cut, and so you'd have to be very, very adaptable in that time. But the question that you've asked me, what's the difference between amateur boxing and professional boxing? I think most amateurs always want to finish their career and go through and turn professional, and that's one of the things that you shoot for. So in the amateur boxing, again, it's like sprinting, though it's the same field. It's like sprinting and marathon running, and that's the way I perceive it to be. Short distance and explosive is the amateur boxing, and obviously the longer duration is the thing, and again then obviously turning professional, you have all the train longer and build a better engine, that sort of stuff, and whatever, but I think everybody that goes into amateur boxing, if they have any aspirations, I think is to turn pro, and we all want to be successful, and we all want the adulation, and we all want to be patted on the back and become a celebrity. As I say, boxing now is so high now, it's so popular, it's at its most popular, I mean, you go on social media nowadays, and the following that some of the fighters, and this for me as a coach is fantastic, and as much as some of the stuff it isn't in the real world, it's nice for these people to be getting applauded, especially boxers, because that's my chosen sport, and for that to be there and the lads getting the adulation that they rightly deserve, good on it,
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, and I think that what's interesting too, obviously in amateur level, I suppose, obviously the demands are different. You've got the 3-minute rounds, but then when you go to pro as well, I think it's only so many are going to go pro, so it's almost like you're going up a division or two. Yeah. Well, again,
as an amateur boxer, what you probably do if your aspirations is to turn professional, I think a good standing in there, not always, because I'll bring up a few differences that are sorted in that maybe people can relate to. So amateur boxing, you want to win national titles, and then you want to represent your country, and then maybe go to games, Commonwealth Games or Olympic Games, and if you medal there, well then you then become a target for the big promoters, for the Eddie Earns or the Frank Warrens of this world, and that's where you want to be. And I was fortunate in a way of I ended up turning pro, as I say, with Barry Earn, and I was on the verge, obviously, thinking of turning pro. And I remember sitting on the beach, funny enough, Glyfada Beach in Athens, with my old England teammate Henry Wharton, and we were sitting there, and we'd lost out on going to the Seoul Olympics. So we were sitting on the beach in Glyfada Beach after the Acropolis Cup, and we were there, and we said to Henry, who are you going to go to? And Henry said, well, I'm going to go with Mickey Duff, I think, So I said, I'm not too sure. I said, I'm Duff or possibly Frank Warren or whatever there, when Barry Earn wasn't in the offing really so much then, he was just breaking into the game. He'd done a few joint promotions with Terry Lawless, that was Frank Bruno fighting Joe Bugner at Tottenham Hotspur, and Barry being a big fan there, so he hadn't really quite come into the obviously the question really in the conversation of that, so it was always Mickey Duff and Frank Warren, Jarvis was there, they were the like the boxing mafia, but then back there the stranglehold on the boxing, that was why it was always predominantly in London. So we were talking anyway. Henry said that I'm going to go with Mickey Duff, you know. So I said, oh well, you know, I think probably I'd go with Duff, you know. Anyway, funny enough, I actually rung Mickey Duff's office, you know. So it was funny because at the time Mickey was working obviously big over in America, and he was over there actually at I think it was a John Mugabe fight. I think John Mugabe was possibly was over there. I remember at the time because I rung the office and there was a lady, a secretary, who answered the phone. So I said, I wonder if I could speak to Mr. Duff, please. She said, who is it? So I said, it's Alan Levene. It's a fighter who's wanting to turn professional. She said, oh, sorry, you know, Mr. Duff's not in the office, you know, at this moment in time. So I said, oh, okay, you know, I said, I'll call back. She said, okay, let me take some stuff. What's your name? Alan Levene. Where are you from? Liverpool. So she took that down and she said, have you won an ABA title? So I said, no, I haven't. So he said, oh, Mickey Duff only takes fighters who've won an ABA title, you know. So I said, is that right? And I named off a host of fighters that Mickey Duff had that hadn't won ABA titles, you know. Yeah. So going back to the question you asked me before, you know, over amateurs and winning stuff, and, you know, it's not always... It's great to win national titles and box for your country, which is because not everybody represents the country. Yes. You know, I look back, I never done out of the game what I wish I would have liked to have done. Yeah. But you know, I don't hold no regrets for that. But one thing I do, you know, I'm proud that I represented my country and I medalled at young England level and I medalled at senior level. You know, so you know, listen, it's great. You know, and again, 52, I'm still travelling the world with the boxing, and I'm very, very lucky that way. But going back to what you were saying, the point being is that you don't have to be successful as an amateur boxer to become a good professional boxer. Now I'll go back to one of the fighters who was present around my time. A very, very good friend of mine is Jimmy Neary, Shane Neary. Now Jimmy come into he'd been in the services, and then so Jimmy come out of the after being a serviceman in the army, and he come out and then he boxed for one of my old clubs, the Golden Gloves, and Jimmy come along the way there. Now Jimmy couldn't win an ABA title, you know, because there's only one title a year, you know, and there's so many fighters that go for it. And Jimmy had got beat by a good boxer out of the Salisbury club, Lee Rimmer, at the time, and Jimmy got pipped a couple of years there. But Jimmy, as a pro, was a good world champion. He went on to be WBU world boxing champion, you know, and he worked his socks off. And you know that's the difference between people say to me over fighters and different bits, and they always bring Jimmy's story out, funny enough, and he always say over that because he worked his socks off for every fight he had. He absolutely worked his socks off to get there, you know. And so Jimmy wasn't. It's funny. It's a bit like again going back to the sprinting and the marathon running. So Jimmy wouldn't be a great sprinter, but Jimmy would make a marvellous marathon runner, you know, and I use it in that analogy because come the pro game, you know, after 9 minutes in the amateurs, the bell go to give the decision. Well, Jimmy would only be getting warm by that stage and getting his, you know, and getting his hand and iron, by then. But when it comes to the pro game, and he could come on and he'd get stronger and stronger and stronger in a fight, and he'd wear down, he'd absolutely break people's hearts because they'd given their best, and it wasn't good enough, and he'd still be coming and he'd just be getting warm by that stage, and he'd come on down like a thoroughbred racehorse down the home straight, that, you know, and put it on people, and so, you know, so that will be one of the you know, so again, you don't have to be a great amateur boxer to turn professional or whatever. And again, you know, yourself, and how I'll come to get in touch with yourself was a little bit of the mind code. You know, there's a lot of dynamics that come into sports, isn't it, Jim? You know, and if your mind is good enough, that can take you anywhere. Absolutely. If you've got a good strong will and a good ambition, you're on the way. You're on the way, and if you get yourself aligned with a good coach who believes in you and is as ambitious as you, well, then, you know, the world's your oyster.
It's fascinating, you know, hearing you say, obviously, your experience as a coach as well, a successful coach in boxing too. And so, you know, for example, you take, say, an Anthony Joshua, who a career sort of I followed since I watched the Olympics and saw him sort of watched his fights at the Olympics. He'd won gold and he's gone on to do exceptionally well. But on the other hand, you've got, you know, a Tyson Fury at the moment who... Yeah, he's everywhere, really.
Oh, fabulous.
I mean, it'd be fascinating to get your take on. I mean, for me, if there was any doubts about his boxing ability, Alan, Tyson Fury. And I must admit, I'll hold my hands up. I'm no boxing expert. I don't know anywhere near as much as you do and that sort of stuff. But I felt for me, I hold my hands up when he announced his comeback. I thought, well, this could go anyway.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Man,
what a roller coaster ride it's been of Tyson's, you know. But we'll go back to Anthony Joshua again over kids and encouraging kids into sport. You know, Anthony sort of coming to the game a little bit late, and he was fortunate. When I say fortunate, in the respect he was heavyweight. You know, and there's not, you know, the walk around weight and the regular weight is welterweight, average age, average size, you know, of people 10 stone 7 or whatever. So AJ Anthony was a heavyweight, you know. So there's smaller numbers in that now. I know at the moment we're having a great balloon time in the heavyweight division. Now this happens over time. You get cycles where there's, I mean, go back to the Klitschko era. You know, they dominated and they sort of, everybody fell out of love with heavyweight boxing because it was mundane. It was you know, points wins and you know, very very robotic type of stuff, you know. But go back to AJ. So AJ obviously coming to the game sort of quick. He won the ABA, you know, he done well as an amateur, and then they got him in the GB squad. And you know, I have a lot of friends that have worked with him up at Sheffield. You know, my friend and my old England squad mate Rob McCracken, he's the national coach, Rob. And he worked with him. Another very, very good friend of mine who actually worked the corner with him in London when he won the gold medal, Paul Wormsley. Paul's an old friend of mine from Liverpool, and he worked with AJ. He was actually in the corner when he won the gold medal. So AJ obviously got in there, and listen, what a fine, you know. And again, this is different. I mean, if you were to put Anthony Joshua next to Tyson Fury, you know, the two absolutely both ends of the scale to an extent. You've got AJ who looks the perfect poster boy for fitness and stuff, which is great. And then you look at Tyson and the roller coaster Tyson's been on, and you know, he doesn't look like the poster boy, but there's where boxing becomes completely different. And if you misread it, wow, you've got in there. And you've got AJ who's been sort of like modelled into the you know, the heavyweight champion of the world, which is great, pleasing on the eye and everything else. But you know, you're talking about ring savvy and ring craftsmanship, you know, and he's got a great boxing IQ as Tyson, you know, fabulous, you know. So that can only be covered and learnt in time. And Tyson has had the very sort of like closeted, when I say closeted, coaching approach of his own family. You know, which then brings its own thing, which is fantastic. I mean, I trained with Tyson's dad, John, at Franny Hans's gym in Liverpool. Wow. I was amateur, and I used to sneak into Franny's gym because there was an old rule in them days where amateurs wasn't allowed to train with pros. It was sort of like a no, you wasn't allowed it. But on my days away from my amateur club, I trained with my old co-pro, Eddie Pugh, in Franny Hans's gym, Tuesday and Thursday. Now, at that time, John Fury, Tyson's dad, was getting ready to fight my old England teammate Henry Akinwande at the GMEX on the undercard of my great friend out of Liverpool, former WBC featherweight champion Paul Hodgkinson, fighting Marcus Filisana, the first fight at the GMEX here in Manchester, you know. So John, when I say Tyson was closeted, so Tyson has only been coached by his own family, his father and his uncle Peter and his late uncle Huey. So you know, and what a job that's done, you know. Wow, fabulous. You know, we were saying over parents and being overzealous and whatever. Obviously, in that case, it doesn't work. You know, they have good boxing IQ in their bloodline along the line, and they've studied enough. You know, I know Tyson's uncle Peter certainly has. You know, and lots of studying on boxing and you know, and so they've done their job. But like sort of two extremes, and yet both of them now are old, and you know, AJ and Tyson Fury, and that's the fight that's out there. And I think what's happened with Tyson's journey, it resonates so much with everybody in walking life, because you know, now he's opened up public. where he was sort of like vilified in one sense in his early days. Tyson was, because I know he had the big spat with like David Price and Tony Bellew in stages, and he was at the time he was with Mick Hennessy, and he was sort of like he was on Channel 5 and the smaller shows, and then Tyson's early part of his career never really caught fire. He was still unbeaten, and he was just beating people who he should have beat to an extent, and he sort of got over the line with the fight with John McDermott, and then they sort of manoeuvred him a little bit, but then obviously he took the Klitschko fight, and then that come along the line, and obviously from then on he won that, and sort of like all of a sudden within overnight, wow, everybody wanted a piece of Tyson Fury, and then it sort of like it overwhelmed them a little bit, you know, and this is where we come into the stage of the bit of the depression, you know. And sort of overwhelmed Tyson. All of a sudden he's there where he'd always wanted to be as a kid and as a boy, and he sort of like reached the top of the mountain, you know. And then as quick as he got there to the mountain, boy, he come down and he ballooned up in weight, you know. And the mind's a funny thing, innit, you know, how it works, you know. And you know, as mad as it is, I even went through a short stage, and we touched on it again just before the show myself, Jim, you know, where I went through a bit of depression, and I didn't even know I was depressed, you know. And it's a funny thing, and you know, we can't dodge all the raindrops in life, and I'd had a few things in life, you know. The mother of my children, she'd passed away, and he had sort of that to deal with, and then the burden of obviously me two kids, you know, and the thing then as a parent, obviously it's your job then to look after them, and the weight of expectation, you know. I mean, for a couple of years I played Daddy Doubtfire, and not wanting anyone to feel sorry for me, because that's not what it's about. But the point being I'm making is that I didn't even know that it was depression. Depression doesn't even come to you, and you know, it doesn't come. And the classic shout I'd made was, what have I got to be depressed about? But what I was doing, I was actually going in the gym to train my fighters. I know they needed me, and I'd go and I'd put the session in with them, and there was nothing short of whatever. I knew I had to go and, you know, give them, that was importance. I had to go and then give the best I could in that session, and I was coming home into my house, and I was actually going, I'm not one for going to doctors, but I'd go to doctors every now and again to have my blood taken. I thought I was lacking something, lacking iron or everything else, and I was increasing there, you know. And it was the girl I was with at the time, and she said to me, Alan, I think you're going through depression, you know. And again, the classic shout, what have I got to be depressed over? But depression doesn't come to you like that, you know.
Absolutely.
And the great point, the great thing is what I did. I mean, I'd possibly go and speak to a doctor if you were going that way, but you know, I'm not a big believer in antidepressants. If it was me, what I did, I started to get out, and even though I didn't want to speak to people, I shortened my circle down a little bit. And you must never, I know they're going on at the moment over coronavirus, over self-isolating, but that's what people do in depression, and that's what you mustn't do, Jim, you know. So I'm very, very fortunate. I live at the seaside, and the best thing I was doing was going, if I wanted somebody to walk with me, I'd get out and I'd walk, and most of the time I'd walk on my own, but good fresh air and good oxygen. And the big thing again is the love of exercise is great, you know, and you don't have to be super fit or whatever, but get yourself function right, and you know, functionable as in weight or whatever, and you get yourself.
Absolutely, I think it's fantastic, and it's gone so fast, Alan. As we sort of draw to a close now, I want to thank you for coming aboard the show, Salford City Radio 94.4 FM, with your host, Petruzzi, the Friday Sports Show. Alan Levene, incredible career in boxing, as a boxer and as a coach as well, has been kind enough to join us, and no doubt we'll be back on board the show again sometime, perhaps to preview a fight, and so on and so forth. So do get in touch via email, send us an email, or log onto the Facebook page and ask any comments or questions, anything like that. Alan, the time's gone so quick. Mate.
It has done. But any parents who's local, I'm here at the moment. I'm in Salford, and there's some fabulous gyms up and down Manchester. I mean, having me, Jimmy.
Thank you, and thanks for listening. And next week, same time, same place, at 94.4 FM with your host, Petruzzi, on Salford City Radio.